All right, welcome back, my fellow Zoomers. We are now going to think a little bit more about Deuteronomic theology, and we'll probably lean a little bit into Deuteronomic history. So just to be clear, Deuteronomic theology, I know you read a little bit about this in the textbook. See if I can get you a better angle. So Deuteronomic theology, it's all about loyalty to the covenant, loyalty to God, loyalty to each other. So loyalty to the covenant, loyalty to God, loyalty to each other. That if you practice this loyalty to the covenant, which is loyalty to God and loyalty to each other, the outcome of that is blessing. That you will experience God's blessings, you will be fruitful in the land will be productive, your livestock will do well, your families will multiply, and so you'll have peace, and it's going to be like a garden. But if you are disloyal, if you break covenant, then you come under curse. And the curses of the covenant are drought, famine, invasion, warfare, sickness, and ultimately expelled from the land. Okay, so this is a theology. You're obedient, you're keeping covenant, you experience God's blessings, and you live into God's blessed future that he has for you. But if you break covenant so that you're worshiping other gods, so that you're doing each other wrong, then you are going to come under curse, and you're going to kind of live into curse, and you're going to miss out the blessings that God has for you. So this is Deuteronomic theology, and is very much about life in the land. That if you keep the covenant, you practice this loyalty, then life in the land will be bountiful, be like Garden of Eden. But if you break the covenant, if you are disloyal, then life in the land is going to be painful, it's going to be toilsome, and ultimately you'll be removed from the land. And so Deuteronomic theology, it's all about blessings and curses in response to loyalty, and it has to do with how life is going to go for them in the land. Now, God tells them that God is going to give them this land. There are peoples living in the land, but the Lord is going to give the land to Israel, as God promised to Abraham way back in Genesis 12. Now, I want to call your attention to a couple passages in Deuteronomy, because I know some of you are probably troubled, if not all of you, about the violence and about God telling them to go in and show no mercy to anyone, and that they are to fully possess the land. Some of that is rhetorical, that's just kind of war rhetoric, and we can kind of see that if that was to be carried out in full, then there'd be no need for commandments about not intermarrying with the children of the peoples that you're going in to conquer, because there wouldn't be anyone left to intermarry with. And so it's rhetorical, but it's making the point that God is giving them this land, and they are to be exclusively devoted to the Lord. Now, let me read a few passages for you. First, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7. And we see that at verse 2, when the Lord your God gives them to you, these peoples, and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. So again, I hope you see kind of the irony in that if they are to fully destroy them, then why do you need to worry about commandments about intermarriage? And so some would say that this is evidence that what we're dealing with here is war rhetoric, that they're not to be literally destroyed as much as it is that they are to kind of make sure that they don't interact with them whatsoever. You can do with that what you want, but that's one of the responses. Okay, then we go down to verse 6. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. But he also brings judgment. Now, the thing I want you to pick up on is that the Lord is being clear, or Moses is being clear. Don't think the Lord chose you and is giving you this land because you're so mighty, because you're so strong, because you're such a great people. No, the Lord's just keeping his promise that you're actually one of the least of the peoples on the face of the earth, but the Lord is merciful to you and the Lord is faithful to what he promised Abraham. So don't get arrogant about being given this land as if somehow you are worthy of it. Okay, then we go over to chapter 9, and these types of warnings continue. So I'm at chapter 9, verse 4. Do not say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out before you, all the peoples, it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me in to possess this land. Whereas it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. Not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God is driving them out from before you, that he may confirm the word that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Know therefore, the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stubborn people. Okay, and this is really important to get. The Lord is not giving them the land because somehow they are a super righteous people. Very opposite, they're stubborn. And we've seen 40 years of rebelliousness in the wilderness. But rather, the Lord is going to use the Israelites to bring judgment upon the peoples who are already living there in the land. That their sin has reached a level, their guilt has accumulated to where now it's time for judgment. And God is going to use the Israelites to come into the land and to remove these peoples from the land, to bring God's judgment upon them. So this is one of the things that we see happen throughout the Old Testament. God is sovereign over all nations. God is sovereign over all history. And then God is doing this balancing act of justice. And so when one nation gets too haughty, too arrogant, does too much violence, then God raises up another nation to bring that people low, to bring that nation low. And then if that nation gets too arrogant, too haughty, commits too much violence, then God raises up yet another nation to kind of humble that nation. So God is always doing this kind of balancing act of the nations, of the peoples throughout history. And we see this all through the Old Testament. And so here, the Israelites have been down in Egypt while the sins of the peoples in Canaan have been accumulating, have been rising. And finally, they reach a level to where God says, okay, now it's time for justice to come to these people, for them to be humbled. And God raises up the Israelites and brings them into the promised land. And so that these people come under the judgment of God for their atrocities. Same thing's going to happen with Israel. That from this Deuteronomic theology, as we get deeper into the history of Israel, their sin is going to reach such a level that God has to say, wait a minute, they're my people, but that's not me. And so God will raise up the Assyrians to bring low the Israelites. And then God will raise up the Babylonians to bring low not only the Assyrians, but also the kingdom of Judah. God is constantly doing this juggling act. He'll raise up the Persians to humble the Babylonians. So all through the Old Testament, God is at work bringing about some measure of justice on the face of the earth. And empires are good in terms of bringing order and stability, but when their sins reach a level to where now it's more chaos than stability, then God will raise up, or more violence than stability, God raises up a new people, a new emperor, to bring judgment upon that. We see it small scale here with Israel going into Palestine, the land of the Canaanites. We see it larger scale as we get deeper into the Old Testament. So I don't know if that helps you any with kind of the violence and the rhetoric that we see here. The command to show no mercy. Don't know if that helps you any or not. It's pretty uncomfortable reading. But what we see kind of as we step back, that God is at work to bring some measure of justice on the face of the earth. And he'll raise up one people to bring judgment upon another people. And then if that people becomes haughty, arrogant, sinful, God raises up yet another people to bring judgment upon them. And that goes back and forth all the way through. Some have pointed out, God doesn't have much to work with. He's got this empire, this people, and everybody's crooked. Everybody falls short of his glory. So anyways, that's kind of, the Deuteronomic theology as it applies to Israel especially. And then we also see God doing this balancing act all throughout the Old Testament. Want to switch gears real quick and sketch out the history a little bit, and then we'll pay closer attention to this on another video. But I want us to at least take a quick look at it here. So you remember Deuteronomic theology, blessings and curses in response to loyalty to the covenant. You're loyal to God, you experience, and to your neighbor, you experience blessing. You're disloyal to God, you diss your neighbor, you're going to come under curse. This is Moses saying, look, when you go into the land, this is how you are to live. So the next phase of our Bible is the historical books of Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. And you'll see 1st and 2nd Kings spans quite a bit. I guess I took you off the screen there, so get it turned back around. And so here they are with Joshua. They're going to enter into the promised land, and a rough date for this is 1240. You'll find some different dates given, but we'll go ahead and use this. And so 1240 BC, they are going to enter into the promised land under Joshua's leadership. Okay, back here, Deuteronomy, Moses has died. Remember way back here, 1800, there you have Abraham. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, they're down in slavery. Then we get Moses. Moses leads them out of Egypt, roughly 1280, gives them the book of Deuteronomy before they enter into the promised land, gives them these 3 speeches. And now, first 5 books are closed, and we're moving into the Deuteronomic history. So that consists of Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. And what this does is it's history told through a lens. And the lens that it's told through is Deuteronomic theology. So kind of abbreviation there. The theos for God, theology. And so Deuteronomic theology is the lens that it's told from. So we're going to see this with Joshua. We'll see this play on out. But we'll get Joshua, Judges, and then 1st and 2nd Samuel. And 1st Samuel is all about Samuel, Saul, and David. 2nd Samuel is all about David. Then we get 1st and 2nd Kings. The first 10 chapters of Kings is about Solomon. And then the kingdom's going to split. And then we get the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah. And the northern kingdom is going to continue until 722. And then they'll be conquered by Assyria. The southern kingdom, Judah, it's going to continue until 587, and then it's going to be conquered by Babylon. And I know you've read all about this in Discovering the Old Testament already, but we're going to unpack it here as we go. So the key thing I want you to pick up on for the moment is that history is always told through a lens. It's always told from a particular perspective. And so what we have going on here is Israel telling its history through the lens of Deuteronomic theology. So as they reflect on their history, what they're going to see is every time they are obedient, they experience blessing. But whenever they are disobedient, then they come under God's curse. From a Deuteronomic perspective, the reason why the northern kingdom falls to the Assyrians isn't because Assyria is so strong and bent on conquering the world, it's because Israel broke covenant. That had they kept covenant with the Lord, then they would not have been kind of wiped off the map, if you will, by Assyria. If they would have been faithful to God and faithful to each other, keeping this covenant, then they would have somehow survived Assyria, and God would have protected them. But as it is, God used Assyria to bring judgment upon them because they were not loyal to the covenant. Okay, same thing with Judah and Babylon. That the reason why Judah falls to Babylon in 587 isn't because simply Babylon was bent on conquering the world. It's because Judah sinned against God, that they broke covenant. And so the outcome of breaking covenant was they finally experienced the ultimate curse. Babylon came and Babylon exiled them from the promised land. Okay, are you kind of getting how this works? So history is always told through a lens. And this lens for Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, it's all compiled and told through the lens of Deuteronomic theology. Now, we'll take a slower walk through this so that you can begin to see how it really plays out. But for now, I want you to kind of begin to think about these books together, and that they're a historical work that is told through a particular lens. So don't think simply about the book of Joshua. Don't think simply about the book of Judges as if they are kind of independent works. Rather, it's kind of, we might even think of it as one work with 4 volumes or 6 volumes if you want to go 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. So volume 1 would be Joshua, volume 2, Judges, volume 3, Samuel or 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then volume 4, volume 5 and 6, however you want to go with it. Then we get 1st and 2nd Kings. But it's one work. It's history told from this dominant perspective of Deuteronomic theology. Okay, that's probably about it for today. And we're going to, in days to come, we are going to unpack this further and take a little bit slower walk through it. Now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, how's all this going to work? How many sessions do we have left? So we have class this week, and then it's Easter weekend. And so no class on Thursday, just class on Tuesday. And then after that, we have 6 class sessions left. And so I'll try to set those up so that you get the lectures, and then I'll create some Zoom time in there as well. But I'll probably make the Zoom time more kind of optional, if you will. So I'll be on Zoom. I'll have a meeting set up, and if you want to Zoom in and talk about stuff, we can. If you're not interested in talking about stuff, you're getting enough through the recorded lectures, all good with me. But just want you to know that I'm available to you to kind of work through this stuff a little bit closer. So anyways, thanks for watching, and hope you guys have a great Easter weekend. And I know you can't get out to church anywhere, but I hope you're able to live stream and be able to worship the Lord, and that you're part of Christian fellowship in one form or another. God bless. Have a great weekend.